Good morning, everybody. Graham Coath here. Now, I know it's really early, so I hope you've managed to get a cup of tea or coffee before tuning into this today. But I'm joined by James Turing. We're going to talk about the Turing Trust and all of the work that they do. Thanks for joining me, James.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Well, that's fine. Where are you coming from?
So we're in Edinburgh. In Edinburgh at the moment.
Yeah. And what's Edinburgh like in terms of both sort of easing out of lockdown and weather as well?
Gloomy and gloomy. It's one of those things. I think we're getting there, but it certainly seems to be dragging on. That's for sure. But hey, got to do it. So we'll just get through it, and we'll be fine. We'll come out the other end.
Absolutely. Now, James, I noticed you just put your name up as James. Rather than the Turing, but what a namesake! Just very briefly, people may obviously recognise the name from Alan Turing, who's going to be appearing on lots of £50 notes. Not that I often see a £50 note, I have to say, but what does that feel like, knowing that you'll be able to carry around a member of the family in your pocket?
Yeah, a little weird. I think it's the same as sort of all those jokes about carrying around the Queen on a stamp kind of thing. But extraordinarily humbling, I would have to say, is the first bit. I mean, we all were very aware of Alan's legacy growing up as kids, etc. But it seems over the particularly last 10 years, after the Imitation Game came out and things like that, that his star has just continued to rise. And it seems almost every day there's something else that's happening where you're going, oh yeah, Alan did that as well. Okay, not bad. And this is one of the latest, and I think perhaps one of the most monumental. I think, there's only a few dozen people who ever make it onto a banknote. So extraordinarily humbling. And I just hope people will forgive me for paying with 50s for everything from now on.
No, I'm sure they were. Were you good at codes as a child? Were you given things like Rubik's cubes and other things to see how good you were at decoding?
Sort of. I mean, there was definitely a little bit of that in there, but I think particularly for me and my brother, we were both, although we were both into technology, neither of us were particularly into computer science necessarily. I think it's one of those things where the background we'd been given in sort of learning a lot about Alan had led us into quite deep basics and fundamentals and theory of computer science, rather than more of the practical applications. And if you go back sort of 20 years, there weren't these kind of amazing apps and stuff you can download like Scratch to get kids into coding. So you would have been dealing much more with, HTML or C++ or something that's a bit rawer and a bit harder to probably first get to grips with. So neither of us ended up going into it, probably because we're not intelligent enough, although don't tell my brother that. And we both ended up going into more, human subjects. So, for example, my brother ended up going into history. For me, I did architecture with civil engineering and then led on to international development. But certainly it was one of those things we were quite aware of as children. And generally, I think we kind of thought, that's a bit tough. We'll leave that to Alan.
Oh, wonderful. Now, you've had a relationship with Nextstand in terms of Nextstand supporting you over the last few years. When did that relationship start?
Yes, that's right. So a little over a year ago now, I think. And so Nextstand have been fantastic in joining us as one of our corporate partners, where basically every sale of one of their laptop stands ends up in a donation, which helps get another computer into a school, which is fantastic. I think it's a really wonderful way to kind of approach business, almost a bit like a one-for-one kind of model, which is wonderful.
Cool. When did the Turing Trust start? And when did your involvement with it start?
So the charity was born in 2009 with a very simple mission to try and get one computer lab in one classroom in Ghana. And I think in 2010, we donated an entire 2 laptops, which was a huge achievement. And then things slowly grew quite organically from then. So although we had the initial ambition of just one computer lab in one school, once we got our first 20 computers, we realized actually there's a few hundred more we could get here. And kind of saw that opportunity, which really started snowballing and led to thousands of computers now, which is wonderful.
That's brilliant. How's this pandemic affected the work of the Turing Trust?
It's been interesting. So on the one hand, we've seen a wonderful outpouring from the community. There have been hundreds of, if not thousands, of offers of computers, and we've seen lots of donations come in as well. But on the other hand, it's had plenty of challenges. I mean, for example, our work in Malawi, they've gone through some pretty serious lockdowns as well, with school closures and things that have made it pretty difficult for our staff to get out there and do their work in installations, but also in the monitoring and teacher training and things like that. And likewise in the UK, I mean, we're basically a volunteer-run charity. All the computers that we get are processed at some point by a volunteer. And obviously with lockdowns, volunteering for a time was a bit of an awkward can you not? And certainly for lots of our volunteers, we have lots of guys who are over 60. So volunteering for them was a you probably shouldn't kind of situation. And that had a pretty significant impact, and still does. We're still very limited in the office. You know, normally we might have, say, up to 20 people in the office in one day. We're currently working at more like 5. So it's been challenging, but on the other hand, I think I've been really delighted by the response. It seems that the pandemic has really shone a light on inequality, be it globally or be it locally. And I think that's one of the things where, sort of, if you rewound 2 years ago, we'd say, oh, every single person in the UK has a mobile phone, a tablet, and a laptop, guaranteed. Everyone's so digital, how could they not? But the reality is, whilst one family might have one laptop, that doesn't mean all 4 children have a laptop. You know, going from 1 to 5 laptops in a household is no small thing. That's pretty expensive. And I think this pandemic has actually highlighted the inequalities that we face in the UK that we all need to do something about. And there has been a terrific response. Credit where it's due. The government have managed to get, I think, 750,000 laptops out over the last year, which is not bad.
Yeah, it's very good. Yeah.
However, it's also not quite enough. We're still getting a good number of requests coming in, but we've had some fantastic support over the last few months, particularly with donations of cash to enable us to get the computers out there, but also the laptops themselves, which is all important.
So what have the Turing Trust been doing on a localized level within the UK over this period to support students?
So beforehand, the majority of our computers were destined for our partner countries in Malawi, for example, or Liberia, Gambia. But the pandemic's really highlighted the need for tech in the UK that perhaps is of a different kind than what we previously aware of. So we still have lots of schools who donate computers to us. However, that relationship has changed quite fundamentally. If you go back 2 or 3 years, most of the schools that we had approached in the past saying, would you like some computers from us? They'd go, no, you're all right, mate. We don't use Windows 7 anymore, sorry. You're going, yeah, fair enough. I'm glad to hear that. That's a wonderful situation for you to be in. But then with this drastic need and sort of the urgency for the laptops to get out to schools, that really shifted the goalposts, I think. And for the first time, we were seeing lots and lots of requests coming in. So we tried our best to get the laptops that we did have in stock out as quickly as possible, and get more donations to come in so we could get those processed and back out the door. So I think we've got well over 100 laptops out to students around the UK, and still going. So we might see a fair few more going out as although lockdowns are slowly lifting. I think there's still going to be some ongoing longer term effects. There's lots of schools I know are still doing bubbles and things like that. So there's still a need out there that hopefully we can help to fix.
I think you're absolutely right in sort of pointing out that sort of cultural divide between those that do have and those that don't have. And in terms of sort of digital accessibility, there's a lot of work still to go in this country in terms of who has and who hasn't. You know, and that's going to become even more important because I found, having talked to a lot of people in higher education, I have a background over the last 5.5 years in sort of ed tech, that a lot of institutions have found the benefit over this period of actually presenting everything online. And for a number of their students, they've enjoyed the benefit of that. And a lot of them are actually thinking that that's the way to go going forward. But then that's just going to increase the divide if people haven't got access to that digital information. So it's a really important thing that you're doing there. In terms of running your organisation during this period, what sort of tech have you turned to yourself?
Not a lot's actually changed. I mean, I think we were all sort of using WhatsApp calls and things like that. We only had one experience where we were trying to do a conference call in the office, and we realized, yeah, actually sticking a phone in the middle of the table isn't going to work, is it?
No.
So we have, started using Google Meet a little bit more, but previously, I mean, we were just doing, normal phone calls. Haven't done, well, I think I've probably done more Zoom calls and things like StreamYard. This is my first today, so that's a new one. But I don't think for us as an organization, the technology barrier has been too insurmountable, really. I think that's probably a good sign. The fact that we were kind of like, oh, yeah, that'll be fine. We can all kind of do some work from home, some of us, and the guys in the warehouse will have to make another plan for. But yeah, it's good to see that things can continue in that sense.
Yeah. Any tips from yourself in terms of maintaining a team's mental health and well-being whilst going through a pandemic?
Yeah, no, it's a challenging one. I think you have to appreciate that everyone deals with it differently. Some people will absolutely fly with it. I mean, one of my colleagues who I don't think he ever used to spend more than 8 hours in his house a day. He was always, out and about town, just really enjoyed that kind of aspect of life, and had never seen himself ever wanting to work from home ever. Has actually turned to it quite well. I'm sure he would love not to have to work at home, but actually he's found that working from home is far more productive in terms of, yes, you miss out on the social aspects of the office, but consequently it also means there are far fewer distractions. It's one of those things where people won't turn to you and ask you the little question that probably they knew the answer to anyway, because picking up a phone and making a call just takes that a little bit longer, and they'll just become a bit more empowered with their own decision making, which is a great thing. So there are lots of positives that can come out of it like that. But on the other hand, I think it's one of those things you do need to be careful of. For example, we have lots of people who use public transport to get to us. Now, for some people, they'll be perfectly fine with that, and that's wonderful. But for others, there is a heightened concern around that, and there probably will be for some time to come. So trying to see what we can do about that, things like changing the working hours so that you can come outside of rush hours and things like that, particularly when schools are in. Getting on the bus with 400 other kids is probably a little bit worse than coming an hour later going on with like 20 other people. So yeah, it's definitely just about checking in with each person as an individual and seeing what their concerns are and what we can do about it.
And you say you're based in Edinburgh, which is a lovely, lovely city. I've always enjoyed going up there. But have you found that a little bit difficult and confusing in this period? Just the fact that the legislation and the restrictions, etc., in Scotland have been different from England. Quite confusing, yeah. I think, for many of us.
Yeah, it's almost like, why do you bother watching the news? Fundamentally, what you need to go do is look at the Scottish Government website, ignore everything else on the news because it probably doesn't affect you for at least 2 weeks until something else will change. So yeah, it has been long-winded, I think is the best way of putting it. You're getting all excited about something reopening and then you find it's only in England and Wales and you're going, okay, cool. So yes, it's one of those things where I think the political divisions between Scotland and the rest of the UK have really been highlighted. For better and for worse, I think there's been some ways that Scotland's come out of this a lot better. However, there have been a few others that people, I think we've got a friend who works in the hotel industry and they're saying, well, look, England and Wales have got far more grants than we have. Why? This doesn't make any sense. We're under the same restrictions in that sense. And you just realize that, yeah, that divide in how it's being managed does cause more conflicts. So we'll see where it takes us in the next few years.
Now, for people that are listening that may want to help, so let's just talk about how people can actually help the Turing Trust to do what you're doing. So how can people get involved?
So number one is definitely just take a little inventory of any IT equipment you have around your house that you haven't used in a year or two, and please think about donating it. We've got a very simple process for individuals as well as businesses. So if you're working in a company and you think they might be going through an IT refit, or indeed haven't got a clue what you do with your old IT, then please do find out, because lots of companies pay a fairly large amount of money to get rid of their old IT equipment when actually they could be donating it for free. We can also offer free collections and things like that for large volumes. So number one is definitely just have a look at your own IT equipment. If you think you're not using it anymore, please do get in touch. Just go on our website. You'll see we've got a page there called Give Computers. That will have all the instructions about, for example, how we deal with data. Basically, everything that we receive gets deleted, so there's nothing left on your computer after we've wiped it whatsoever, so you needn't worry about that. And then you can see...
Oh, you went a bit robotic on me there for a second, James. The gremlins don't want James to be telling us how to help him. Can you get your... Yep, I think you're back.
Yeah, interesting. Yep. It stops being ironic, but there you go. It will happen. So I was saying we can basically wipe all computers and also do collections. So please do get in touch with us on our website. We've got a page called Give Computers that details all of how we do it, as well as the social and environmental impacts that your donation will have. So yes, please do just have a think about your own IT equipment or your company's and think about donating it.
Yeah, is there sort of an age of computer that you do take and something that you don't take? What's too old?
The general rule is anything that's 6 years or younger we can use.
Yep.
However, if you've got a really whizzy 8-year-old computer, then there's a chance we'll probably still be able to use it. There's always a balance to be struck. It's there's no hard and fast rule of what can and can't be used. It's very much a case of, is your equipment in good condition? So, for example, laptops that have been knocked around the house probably won't have 7 years in them, but they might have 5. So just a general kind of common sense. If you think your computer would be useful, just send it in. Worst case scenario, we'll end up recycling it for you.
I've got a question for you from Nextan, which I don't know whether they've talked to you about before. When the things go out, does anyone give any kind of education to anyone that receives the computers about ergonomics? Just an interesting point.
Absolutely. No, I think that's the most important thing about our projects in Malawi particularly. We know that if you kind of drop a computer in the classroom and just leave it there and expect everything to magically work, you'll go back in 3 months and the computer won't even turn on because it'll be broken. So before we install any computers, we make sure that we do some teacher training just on the basics of how to use the computers. So little things like you must use the surge protected cable when attaching the computers. Otherwise, your computer will get fried and you'll be crying. So it's one of those little things where, there isn't necessarily the understanding of why surge protected cables are so important when they don't matter for phone chargers. Well, the answer is your phone charger's essentially got that surge protection built in, which is wonderful. But for a desktop computer, you need to have it. So before we install any computers, we do teacher training in that sense. When we're actually installing them, we'll do another round of that, basically covering some of the more basic maintenance things like blowing the dust out of computers when needed. And then we've got a maintenance program. So essentially, the way it works for our beneficiaries in Malawi is they are essentially leasing the computers from us. So at any time anything breaks down, they just bring it back to us and we'll replace it with a as new one and then try and do the repairs on our side. Because that way we can actually ensure there's a sustainable future for these IT classrooms rather than sort of a flash in a pan. Oh, you've got 20 shiny computers, but none of them work in 6 months. So we're really in it for the long haul. It's about making sure that these schools are teaching IT for 5, 10, 20 years. And that's kind of where we're at.
And alongside potentially people donating IT equipment, what about if people want to volunteer?
Yep, so volunteers are extremely welcome. In our Edinburgh workshop, we've got normally non-corona times, maybe up to 20 people any day working in the office, helping us out in refurbishing these computers. You don't need a specific skill set to come and join us, just a general interest in what we do. There's plenty of IT work that we can teach you right from the basics. There's also plenty of other jobs if you don't necessarily want to be doing the software-based stuff. There's a lot of warehouse work that we can always use help with, particularly things like testing monitors, really simple, but takes a lot of time. So we're always very keen to get more volunteers who are in the area.
That's really interesting. Have any volunteers that have worked for you in the past gone on to do other jobs in IT?
Yeah, dozens. That's one of the things I think we're really proud of, is the way that we never really planned it, but we kind of realized that we were one of the few places you can go and muck around with IT equipment in the flesh and actually just experiment as you learn. So if anyone ever breaks a computer, it's not the end of the world, we'll be fine. But you also get exposed to an immense range of problems. We're essentially running an IT repair shop where you have most of the problems that people couldn't actually repair as well. So there's all kinds of interesting challenges there that people come up to. And I think it's one of those few places where you actually get that hardware opportunity, which is quite different from the software experience, although the two kind of cross over. And so we've had loads of people who've come in who are actually not necessarily just looking to volunteer, but also looking for a bit of that work experience opportunity. I think that experience has really helped people discover that, yeah, they do have a passion for the IT. And that's something where they'll be able to kind of apply it. And fortunately, with a few people where we can provide a reference here or there, then that seems to help. And we've had a dozen or so guys go on into things like network engineering, which is fantastic.
I think that's brilliant. So if people want to get in touch with you, James, or with the organisation, where do they need to go? Just let's leave people on that.
Yeah, brilliant. So if you'd like to get in touch, please just go on our website. You'll see that there's a page of how to help, and click there on the volunteer page and just apply now. Or you can just contact us via info@turingtrust.co.uk.
And the website address is turingtrust.co.uk as well.
That's right, www.turingtrust.co.uk. Brilliant.
James, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you this morning. I hope that this actually generates some interest in both ways. But it's the work that you do is absolutely fantastic. So we continue to support you from the Next Stand team, and look forward to perhaps catching up with you again at a time when we're not so restricted by coronavirus. But for now, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks very much, Graham. Really enjoyed it.
Cheers. Bye for now.
Bye.